Hello everybody and welcome to part 2 of the Transformers Studio Series versus their original figures. This is a weekly series where I pick 5 Transformers Studio Series figures and face them off against some of their original counterparts. Now before we delve into part 2, I first of all want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you who did in fact check out part 1. The reception to that was super overwhelming and I'm so glad that for the most part you guys appear to really love this idea. I also listened very carefully to all of the feedback that I received in that video on how I can in fact actually improve these videos going forward, and one of the main suggestions that I got was the simple fact that I should really showcase alt modes in these, and that is definitely something that you'll see here for part 2 and all of the episodes going forward. I will also be implementing another change, and that's not only comparing the new Studio Series version to one older figure, but basically to any of the other characters that I own in the collection. So let's say for example I own 10 versions of a previously released Jetfire, I would showcase Jetfire with those previous 10 versions instead of just sticking to the original version. Now as always, I would love to know down in the comment section below what characters you guys would like to see me take a look at in the next episode, as honestly I can take a look at pretty much any of the Studio Series figures. So in today's episode, we're going to be checking out Jetfire, Brawl, Lockdown, Barricade, and Jolt. The reasoning behind why I chose some of these is because, to be completely honest, these guys actually have gone through significant improvement over the last couple of years, and not to mention that not all of these characters are in fact a drastic upgrade, and you'll definitely see that when we bring out Lockdown. So without further ado, let's kickstart this video off by taking a look at the Transformers Age of Extinction Lockdown. So starting off firstly, here we have the Transformers Age of Extinction Lockdown, arguably one of the best bad guys that the Michael Bay movies ever produced, but sadly this character, despite being absolutely incredible on screen, really and truly has received incredibly lackluster figures from Hasbro and Takara. Now sadly we haven't in fact actually got that many Lockdown figures to begin with, so we've merely only got the 2014 original deluxe version and of course the 2018 Studio Series version, as I shall be exempting Masterpiece / third party figures, so I won't be bringing in that awesome Peru kill. But in regards to official figures, I'll be completely honest and say that I don't actually think either of these are in fact fantastic, and despite the Studio Series version being a slight upgrade over this 2014 release, I still don't think that it is by any stretch of the imagination perfect. One of the major things that I actually really dislike about this guy was that he was still a deluxe class. In AoE, Lockdown appeared to be almost head to head in terms of a size comparison with that of Optimus Prime, so really Hasbro should have made this guy a small Voyager at least, and I really think that in doing so they could have drastically improved not only the movie accuracy but also the articulation, and not to mention the actual accuracy to the movie in terms of scale. But as we just bring these guys in here for a closer look, the new Studio Series version in regards to a head sculpt absolutely abolishes this AoE version. Now that's not to take anything away from this sculpt, I actually think it looks really impressive. You can see there we've got some remarkable looking sculpted and detailing going on for the face, picked out there in silver, but when you actually bring this version in, of course it's so much more accurate, especially where the green detailing is concerned for the eyes. The torso detailing once again is so much better here for this Studio Series version. You can even see here in regards to the shoulders, we've got the rocket sculpted here, whereas unfortunately that's missing here on this original version. As we just work our way down to the lower section, once again the Studio Series version is better in terms of legs, but an area where I think they are just as bad as each other would be the arms. You can see here for Studio Series Lockdown, he really doesn't have a defined hand, and that is exactly the same here with this Age of Extinction version. You can see how we've got this ugly panel slapped here on the back, and we've got this really ugly panel slapped here on the side, so that is an area that I wish this version could have in fact improved upon. As we just turn our attention here to the side, the Age of Extinction version does in fact actually clean up a lot better than the Studio Series version. You can see how he has indeed got this huge backpack. We've got some really ugly kibble going on here for the back of the legs. It's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but once again not perfect. But an area in which I think the SS version is indeed a lot better in would be the colour scheme. Lockdown was certainly a lot darker in the movie when in comparison to this almost light shade of brown that we've got here for this original AoE version. So overall, in terms of movie accuracy, I do have to give props here to the Studio Series version. It is better, but I wouldn't say that it is leaps and bounds better like we've seen from previous figures. And an area which I think Hasbro massively dropped the ball with would be in regards to accessories. Now I actually can't find the weapons that come with this guy, but he did include a blade as well as some form of battle hook, but the actual original Age of Extinction Lockdown came with that wicked face cannon, which really and truly Lockdown is known for. This looks awesome, and it did in fact actually have a firing mechanism where you could shoot a missile out of, and you could indeed actually attach this here over the top of Lockdown's head in order to actually create that gun face that we see in AoE, which is just such a cool look for this guy. And to be completely honest, I actually think this obliterates the weapons that we got with this guy. I really have no idea as to why Hasbro didn't find some kind of way to actually give him a gun face. Here's hoping that we can in fact see a version 2.0 of Studio Series Lockdown. It may be the Voyager class assortment with some refinements made to the sculpt and of course that gun face, but you could definitely see the evolution here from where we started to where we have ended up. And without further ado, let's get them them transformed up into their Lamborghini Aventador alt modes. And here is both versions of Lockdown fully transformed up into their Lamborghini alt modes, and I think it's pretty obvious as to which one is the winner. The Studio Series version, in my opinion, absolutely destroys the previously released 2014 AoE version here. Obviously, in vehicle mode, I think it looks really, really awesome. Not only is it a lot bigger when in comparison to this Age of Extinction version, but the colour they've used is just so much more accurate. The proportions are just so much better. I love the almost smoky colour of plastic that we've got going on here for the windscreen, as well as here at the rear of the vehicle. You can see the sculpt work really does look excellent. Even here towards the back, the tail light detailing is just so much nicer here on this Studio Series version. And the Age of Extinction release, for whatever reason, didn't in fact actually have windows. So you can see we had this awful ghastly gap going on, which was just not accurate to the movie at all. So it's awesome to finally see that completely filled out. And just overall, I think that the SS version is the better figure. But once again, I do think that this guy really lacks in terms of accessories. And in regards to a major update, I don't really think that this version quite cuts the edge in comparison to some of the other figures that we've got released. I do think that this one here is still slightly lacking. So here's hoping that we can once again see a 2.0 version of this with the actual gun face, all of the accessories that we actually see him use in the movie in that smaller Voyager class scale that we all know Hasbro can do, as we've seen it with the likes of the 86 movie Hot Rod and a few other characters that they are indeed sprinkling across the Studio Series. So here's hoping that in the near future I can in fact actually be reviewing a version 2.0 of Lockdown. But I'd love to know down in the comment section below on what you guys think of both of these figures. Do you guys agree that the Studio Series version of Lockdown is indeed a little lackluster when in comparison to what we could have got, or do you in fact actually believe it's a great release? Next up, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Deluxe Class Jolt. Now this is a character that, despite not actually having that much screen time in the movie, was really one that many of us wanted to finally get in our collections, and finally this year we did indeed get a Studio Series version. And I'll be completely honest and say that I really love this guy. I think he's by far one of the best SS Deluxes that Hasbro and Takara have produced so far, but that's not to say that he was without his critiques. Now, one of the major critiques that he had upon originally being revealed was the fact that his head sculpt resembled nothing like we had seen previously, and that was just simply down to the fact that we didn't indeed actually get a great glimpse of this guy in the movie, and all of the toys, even the Dark of the Moon Deluxe class, did have a head sculpt which really resembled his original 2009 version. So I really do think it's going to come down to personal preference as to whether or not you prefer movie accuracy over the toy accuracy. In my personal opinion, I think they both look great, but it would have been awesome to have maybe seen Hasbro and Takara use the face sculpt, which looked slightly more similar here to the 2009 release, just as the actual movie accurate version looks a little Protoform-esque in its design. But you can just see, in regards to sculpting and detailing, my goodness, is the Studio Series version absolutely incredible. You can see we've got all of that terrific mechanical detailing going on within the torso. I think the arms look absolutely fantastic. You can see there's some really nice sculpt work for the biceps, forearms, and in fact actually here for the claws, you can see as we spin our attention down to the lower section, we've got some faux pieces, but honestly not looking all that bad at all. And then finally taking a look here towards the feet, a little clunky, but we didn't really see a great look of this guy in the film, so to be honest I can't really critique them all that much. And then as we just spin our attention here to the side, of course he is loaded with back kibble, but once again from that very brief scene where he's indeed actually electrifying Jetfire to Optimus Prime, this does appear to be pretty accurate. Now as we bring this guy in for a closer look, you can see that the kibble management across the years, to be completely honest, I would say is pretty much on par on both of them. Neither of them are better over each other, and I really think it's down to the simple fact that this is a part of the character design. But you can see here for the arms, my goodness, it's just such an upgrade here for this Studio Series version. These arms look terrible, the torso looks terrible, the legs are super clunky, these two also look terrible. So the SS version, in my personal opinion, wins absolutely hands down. But I do have to say one thing, is that this 2009 version of Jolt did in fact actually integrate the whips into the body, so these are not removable, unlike the actual SS version, which did come with two whips. Now granted, these are rather chopstick-esque in their design, they're very hard plastic, they don't have any flex to them at all, which is a shame. They've merely just been cast out of grey plastic instead of blue in order to match the movie, so these are a little lacking. But of course it was completely optional as to whether or not to have a more generic look for Jolt, or you could remove the thumbs and of course in fact actually peg them here into the wrists. Personally, I'd never really believed that this version of Jolt actually executed the whips all that great. It would have been awesome if we could have got some form of bendy wire, or maybe just some whips that were pre-posed in something which essentially was just a straight piece of plastic. But nevertheless, in terms of bot mode here, in my personal opinion, I think the SS version wins hands down. So let's get them transformed up into vehicle mode and see how they fare then. And here we have both versions of Jolt fully transformed up into, I believe it's his Chevy Spark alt mode. And to be completely honest, I would say that these guys are roughly a tie in terms of which one seems more accurate and my personal favourite. There are some things that the 2009 version does which I actually prefer over the Studio Series version, and vice versa. So most noticeably would be that I love the gold emblem that we've got going on here for the older release. I really like the yellow highlights that we've got going on for the headlights, whereas that is absent here on this version. But I do like the shade of metallic blue that we've got going on here for the actual headlights themselves. You can see as we spin our attention here to the front, this version is not as clean looking as the actual 2009 release, and I do actually like the smoky plastic that we've got going on for this version. But then in saying that, the blue doesn't look too bad either. As we turn our attention here to the side, I would say that they're roughly even. You can see we've got some gaps going on here with the SS version and also some gaps going on here with the older release. And then as we just turn our attention here to the rear of the vehicle, once again they're even. I do like the Volt logo that we've got going on with this, but of course we've actually got a painted Chevy logo going on with this version. But from a rear, you can see that this version is a little cleaner when in comparison to this, which has got the mechanical arms in fact actually sticking out to the sides, and we've also got that mechanical clip that holds this entire back region into place. So definitely a tie where these are concerned in my opinion. You can also see the shade of blue is very different on both of them. I'm not entirely sure as to which one's more accurate. I kind of want to go here with the 2007 version. I just think the darker, more metallic blue that we've got going on when in comparison to this plastic light blue with the SS version is a little more accurate. But be sure to also let me know down in the comment section below which version do you prefer. Overall, I think the SS version wins hands down for robot mode. It's so much more accurate when in comparison to this version, but that's not to say that's a great thing, as of course the actual head sculpt on the toy version is a little more cooler looking in my opinion when in comparison to the actual accurate head that we're seeing on the CGI model. And so throwing it all the way back to the original 2007 live action Transformers movie, here we've got a comparison next to the Studio Series version of Brawl, as well as the original 2007 leader, as well as Deluxe class, which I'll bring out in just a second. Now it's going to be a little difficult to in fact actually convey this guy in his full entirety as he is massive, but you can see the stark difference. Of course this is the newest Brawl that we've gotten, and I believe that this is in fact the oldest release, and they are very, very different. But to be completely honest, I actually like both of these equally. Now despite this leader class not being 100% accurate to the movie, I love this version of Brawl. I think he looks awesome. He's everything that you would expect from this character. So we've got a machine gun on that side, we've got a bayonet, we've got these really sharp claws, we've got this missile pod here on the side, 2 missile pods on the back, 2 turrets here at the actual top, which is super cool, as well as this super large cannon sticking out from the side, as well as these 2 claws actually sticking out from his shins. This guy is the definition of a Decepticon tank. He looks awesome, incredibly imposing. The articulation actually wasn't too bad on this figure, and he was loaded with gimmicks as well as electronics. Now granted, he wasn't all that accurate to the movie, and when in comparison to the Studio Series version, this one is indeed a lot more accurate. You can see in regards to the face sculpt, is so much more favourable to the movie. The overall proportions are in fact a lot more accurate to the film, as so are the actual weapons. But considering this was one of the first Brawls that we ever got, I actually think Hasbro did a pretty decent job, and if they could have in fact found a way to have indeed actually eliminated this tank turret, maybe they could have cleaned him up a little more in order to resemble this version of Brawl. You can see here this is a lot more streamlined when in comparison to what we actually got in 2007, which is of course a lot more accurate to the movie. But I would love to know down in the comment section below which version do you prefer, the 2007 leader or the Studio Series version. And of course, to very quickly bring out that original 2007 Deluxe class figure, you can see that these are actually surprisingly fairly similar, especially considering that there was roughly 11 or 10 years actually in between their releases. So you can see here, in terms of the detail of the face sculpts, it's actually pretty accurate. Now this is the Deluxe and this is a Voyager, so they're able to capture a little more detail with this larger release, but you can see the missile pods are in the correct place, the tank turrets are in the correct place, the actual tank treads are in the correct place. I think the torso is pretty accurate. Of course this version is a lot better, but you can see in regards to weaponry, it's a lot more accurate here for the SS version, as this did merely have the whole tank turret actually stuck to the arm, but the claws are pretty faithful to the movie, as so is the weapon that we've actually got going on here for this sidearm. And in regards to where the treads actually end up for bot mode, once again it's very similar to the SS version. So a major upgrade, I'm going to say perhaps not. Despite this being more accurate, I don't think that it is leagues above what we actually got in 2007 between the Deluxe and the leader figure. But once again, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below, and without further ado, let's get all 3 of these transformed up in the tank mode and see how they all fare there. And so here we have all 3 versions of the 2007 live action movie Brawl fully transformed up into their tank modes, and all actually looking really awesome. I think this is one of the few examples where I can in fact say the Studio Series version, at least here in tank mode, is just as good as the previous versions. If anything, the older versions are in fact a little better. Now of course the leader version in my opinion wins hands down in terms of articulation. It's got the articulated turret which can go up and down, it's got this actual articulating bed here which can rotate left to right, whereas whereas sadly the Studio Series version has none of that unless you actually detach this, and of course it's a very ugly joint. This section here cannot actually hinge up and down, and you can see that we've got the arms clearly displayed here at the back, whereas here for the leader class, for the most part, it actually conceals really nicely. You can see as we spin our attention here to the rear, this is in fact actually accurate to the tank. Now whilst these are a little bigger when in comparison to what a real life representation would look like, I still don't think they look too bad. So just overall the tank mode on this guy looks awesome. Of course you can see the head actually poking through this gap, but that is actually an area which all versions of Brawl suffer from, even the SS version. So you can see the head there, and you can also see the head for the deluxe release, but the deluxe release too cleans up really nicely. Not really that much visible robot mode kibble, which is fantastic unless you flip him to the underside, and this too does also in fact actually have an articulated turret going up and down, as well as a rotatable turret here at the top, and the missile pods are on ball joints, so can really be manipulated in any way you so desire. So I'm going to be completely honest here and say that I think the older versions are in fact better for tank mode when in comparison to what we got with the newer version. So this guy really is rather tricky for me. I actually think that overall, I think I actually prefer the 2007 leader Brawl over the Studio Series version as a whole. I think robot mode, tank mode, even transformation is a lot more enjoyable than this SS version. But I'd once again love to know down in the comment section below, do you guys agree with me, or do you in fact actually think the SS version is the winner hands down, and do you think that it abolishes these two predecessors? Down now to the second to last figure that we'll be checking out here for part 2. Here we've got the 2007 Transformers Barricade, and if there is one figure from the Studio Series that you really have to point to in saying is a vast improvement when in comparison to its predecessor, it would be Barricade. My goodness, just look at the difference in 10 to 11 years. It really is astonishing. Now, of course, this, if you hadn't guessed, is the Studio Series version, and this is the 2007 Deluxe Class version, the first ever release we ever got for Barricade, and it's crazy how far we've come in terms of engineering. Now, of course, we have since got the movie Masterpiece figure, which I won't be including in these videos, just as, of course, it's MP. It's not really cut from the same cloth as these guys, as, of course, the engineering is way more sophisticated, and it demands a much higher price point. But a figure that I was really hoping to actually showcase in this segment would be Human Alliance Barricade, but it does appear as if I've put him into storage, and sadly I just cannot find that guy anywhere. But that Human Alliance Barricade for its time was astonishing. But nevertheless, we'll take a look here at these two guys. My goodness, check out not only the actual body proportions, but the face sculpts are just leagues beyond. You can see here for the SS version, we've got so much paint going on, so much sculpt work as well when in comparison to this version, which really, much like Starscream, looks a little more animated when in comparison to what you would expect from a live action movie bot. Not to mention that the chest just looks ridiculous. We've got these massive gaps here. It's way too broad, nowhere near as elegant and as streamlined as we got here with the SS version. The arms, for the most part, I'd say are roughly on par with each other, besides where the hands are concerned. Now, for whatever reason, pretty much no version of Barricade actually had proper hands, so you can see we merely just have a thumb, which is flipped out here from the top, with a vaguely visible hand actually sculpted into the back of this component. Once again, really terrible engineering, and actually a really terrible design. This really doesn't look the best. You could, in fact, actually split and lift this up ever so slightly, but once again, still doesn't look the best in my personal opinion. Now, this particular arm did have a gimmick going for it, and I believe it was supposed to resemble Barricade's spinning pizza blade weapon, so this would in fact actually eject and punch forwards, but once again, much like the previous arm, it really doesn't look like a heck of a lot. You can see for the legs, these are actually not too bad. In my opinion, I think that overall, the stability of these is a little better than the SS version. I like how he has got proper knees when in comparison to these dangly grey joints that we've got with this version, but the sculpt as well as the paint is by far a lot better with the SS version. And as we spin our attention here to the back, I actually think the back kibble for the 2007 version is a little better when in comparison to the SS version, but that's mainly down to this guy having a little bit more of a complex conversion when in comparison to the simplistic conversion that this figure had. Now, an area which I actually think the 2007 version is better in would be accessories. Now, with this Studio Series version, we did get included the spinning pizza blade, but with this version, we actually got his companion, that being Frenzy, and I really have no idea as to why Hasbro still haven't as of yet given us a Frenzy for the Studio Series. I think it was such a missed opportunity not to package it with this guy, but nevertheless, in order to actually access Frenzy, much like the movie, he was embedded within Barricade's chest, so you just fold that section down, pull him there forwards, and you can see we've got a really nice Frenzy, fully compact, not looking 100% accurate to the movie, and if I just extend him so you can see him in more detail, still a really nice inclusion, and it looks vaguely enough like him in my opinion. You can see some nice detailing going on for the head, and the proportions work pretty cool, and it's actually really interesting to see him actually folded up in Barricade's chest. So I do wish that we could have got something similar here with this SS version, but of course, overall, in terms of movie accuracy, the newer version absolutely destroys the previous 2007 release, but then in some areas, the 2007 version is a little better. Most noticeably would be the legs, as well as the frenzy, and in terms of actual plastic and the actual weight of them, I do think that this too is vastly superior. This one's a little more fiddly, especially when we get down to transformation. Now, this here is actually quite surprising, despite the Studio Series version being the clear winner in terms of robot mode. I actually think the original 07 version obliterates the SS version in vehicle mode. It looks absolutely terrific. Now, I do believe that this was probably Hasbro's focus point when actually designing this, guys. Honestly, it's turned out a lot better than the figure's actual robot mode. You can see here that the proportions, the details, everything about this looks almost spot on to the movie. We've got the nice 643. I love the paintwork that we've got actually going on here for the headlights. This bumper section looks fantastic, as so does the actual light bar here at the top. You can see the nice shade of plastic that we've got going on here for the windows, and quite surprisingly, there is no evident robot mode kibble actually visible. So this really does look like an authentic police car. You actually wouldn't believe this could transform if I was to hand this to you in this mode. You can see as we take a look here towards the back, we've got this really nice Celine detailing, some nice tail lights painted there, and as we just turn to this side, once again, more of the same. That classic "to punish and enslave" slogan there slapped on the side. And then as we take a look here towards the SS version, not only is it incredibly tiny, but we've got the hands hanging out here towards the back. I think the actual clear plastic looks awful, not to mention the ball joints are so brittle. I actually have 3 of these, and 2 of the clear pieces have in fact actually snapped, so the materials they're using are by no stretch of the imagination up to par with what we used to get in the 2007 movie. Still some nice details going on for the side, but just overall, I don't think it looks as good as the 07 version. Even here for the headlights, they look crap in comparison to what we've got here on this original version. We've even got additional details and some nice orange highlights there, and as we just turn to the side, once again, I just think this original 07 version is so much better than this SS Deluxe version. So I guess if you wanted to keep one in bot mode, it would be the Studio Series version, and one for vehicle mode, it would have to be this 07 version. But definitely a really nice comparison, and it was actually quite cool to compare the differences and similarities in bot mode, and then of course the drastic difference when we got down here to vehicle mode really did flip this on its head, as I was expecting the SS version to be a lot better in both modes when in comparison to its original counterpart. And for the final comparison that I shall be showcasing here for part 2, here we've got Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Jetfire. Now, to be honest with you, both of these figures, very similarly to Brawl, I actually think are really awesome. I have such a soft spot for this original 2009 version of Jetfire, and even into this day, I still do think that it's an awesome figure, but that's not to say that the Studio Series version isn't more accurate, because it is a lot more movie accurate. Now, granted, much like when I showcased Grimlock off in part 1, I do in fact actually have the DNA design kit installed on this guy, but to be honest, that doesn't cloud my judgment at all. I shall be looking at this as if though it was the standard base figure, so I shall be ignoring the articulated fingers as well as some of the components that we've got going on for the back. But you can just see, in regards to a face sculpt, the SS version is so much more faithful to the movie when in comparison to this original 2009 version. Now, to be completely honest, I've always found these actual eyelid sections to be a little strange. I completely get what Hasbro were going for, but I do in some ways wish that maybe they could have in fact actually cut this middle one off, as it really does obstruct the overall eye, and in the movie Jetfire of course had very big eyes, so it would have been better if maybe this could have been slightly reduced. But you can see the attention to detail there just looks fantastic. I think the sculpt work that we've got going on for the torso also looks wicked. Even here for the actual knees, they did in fact actually get the actual thrusters of the jet mode here for the knees, whereas on the original 2009 version these were faux pieces. I believe these end up somewhere in the middle of the jet form, not actually the back of the turbine. So you can see here that we've got these huge thrusters on the sides, whereas they are in fact broken up throughout the leg here on the Studio Series version. So once again, a lot more accurate to the movie. This version not only included the cane, but also included the battle axe that we see him use in order to take down a few Decepticons with in the movie. And you can just see here for the lower section some fantastic looking sculpt work going on. Same can be said here for the biceps as well as for the forearms. This version also has got some nice sculpt work going on, but I just think the SS version takes it to the next level. You can see some pretty decent sculpt going on here, but for whatever reason, much like the Dark of the Moon leader Ironhide, this guy was cast out of blue plastic when in the movie Jetfire was all black. So really have no idea as to what Hasbro's thought process was when in fact actually colouring this guy. But you can see as we spin to the back, definitely not terrible. It does resemble vaguely what we saw in the movie, but it's just these huge thrusters on the sides which definitely are inaccurate. I think the foot design though is pretty cool, and both of them can combine with Optimus Prime. Now granted, this one breaks up into loads of individual components much like we saw in the movie, whereas this actually is sort of a big lump that you just kind of slap on the back. So in regards to accuracy, the Studio Series version ultimately is going to win hands down. But in regards to an actual standalone figure, I do find found myself slightly gravitating more to this older version, mainly just down to nostalgia reasons, I believe. And not to mention, this was back when leader class figures actually had electronic functions, so if you pulled this switch down, you can see here we've got various different cogs that would manipulate, the torso panels would split, the head would shift left to right, and of course he would say Jetfire is my name in this really weird, almost Scottish accent, despite Jetfire being British, I believe, in the movie. But nevertheless, still really awesome figure. I'd love to know down in the comment section below, out of the two, which is your preferred. Of course, if you're going for accuracy, then this new Studio Series version wins hands down. But if you're going for an actual heavy duty toy, I mean, this thing's way over 10 years old and none of the joints up until this point so far, luckily, have broken, then I would definitely recommend this. It's a very big figure, still looks awesome, and once again, is still one of my favourite live action movie figures that Hasbro really ever put out there. Now, unfortunately, as I was just through the process of actually transforming Studio Series Jetfire for the final segment of this review, I have found that as I've installed the DNA Design Upgrade Kit, there are actually some components missing of this, and I actually cannot find them anywhere, so sadly won't be able to showcase that final jet mode comparison, but I will be able to say that I think that both of them in that jet mode would be roughly a draw. Both of them do suffer from having undercarriage kibble, and in some regards the old 2009 version does suffer a little worse, considering that it does indeed have the electronic function. But if my memory serves me correctly, I would say that both of them are roughly an even tie in terms of jet mode. Both transform into incredibly long jets, and both very cool looking jets, but of course, considering just due to the nature of that jet design, they all have the robot mode kibble essentially just slap bang and stuck on the underside. So that just about wraps up part 2 for the Transformers Studio Series versus their original figures. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode just as much as you did part 1. I also hope that you enjoyed some of the subtle changes that I made to this, such as including the vehicle mode, as well as a few additional comparisons like was suggested in part 1. And as always, I'm always open to suggestions on how I can in fact actually improve these, so please feel free to let me know down in the comment section below, not only of what you thought of the video, but also how you guys think I can improve these videos going forwards. And also be sure to let me know on what 5 Studio Series figures you guys would like me to check out in the third part. There are still so many other characters that I can in fact actually revisit and do in fact actually own original versions of. So really, we have so many characters to actually get through. Once again, I want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.